and my name is Sandi Stanford. I'm with the Alamo Breast Cancer Foundation. Today, I'd like to welcome you to one of our Alamo Advocate Chats. We thought it might be very interesting for y'all to know an awesome, patient advocate and cancer survivor to discuss the history of patient advocacy and her role in the advancement of advocacy. So with that, I would like to welcome Gwen Darien, who I've known for a long time, to our chat today. Hi, Gwen, and welcome to the Advocate Chat. So people can get to know you a little better. Will you give us your background and why and what caused you to become a patient advocate?
Yes. Thank you, Sandi, and it's great to see you. Sandi, we've known each other more than 25 years now, and it has been, we've both been in doing patient advocacy and cancer patient advocacy for a very long time, since some of the really early days of advocacy. And so my name's Gwen Darien. I am a 3-time cancer survivor. I met Sandi when I was 1-time cancer survivor, but ended up with two cancers that were late effects of my first cancer treatment. I've been working in advocacy for a really long time, and I've stayed in advocacy for a really long time because a lot of the things that I started doing, we haven't solved yet, and we'll talk about that a little later. But I just wanted to give everybody just a little background about me, as Sandi asked, and what led me to doing advocacy. So when I was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma as a young adult, I was working in the arts, contemporary arts. I was directing a contemporary art center. I thought that was what I was going to do for my whole life, was work in the arts. I started when I was in high school. Actually, it was the first time I interned at a museum. And then like everybody else who's a young adult cancer survivor, or anybody who's a cancer survivor, sort of out of the blue, I was diagnosed with cancer. And also like many young adults, I had a very bad diagnosis story where I wasn't listened to. And my doctor didn't trust me. He didn't trust what I said were my symptoms because I was a young adult and seemingly very healthy, even though I was complaining about some pretty significant effects of this, ill health. Like I couldn't walk a block. I was constantly out of breath. This was not normal for a 35-year-old. So I got through treatment and I thought about what I wanted to do next. And I thought, I don't want to stay in the arts anymore as a profession. I really wanted to change my career so that I could both help ensure that that like most of us who've gotten in this field, that people didn't go through the same thing that I went through, and also to find community. I mean, it was a dual thing. I think at first I used to always say that I wanted to do it for others, but I think it's more honest to say I wanted to do it for others, and I also wanted to do it for myself. So I was trying to figure out what I would do. And an opportunity arose to be editor-in-chief of a magazine for women with breast and reproductive cancer. And that's how I met Sandi Stanford and a bunch of our friends and colleagues, longtime friends and colleagues from the Alamo Breast Cancer Foundation. And that was actually one of the first, that and the National Breast Cancer Coalition conference were the first two advocacy conferences and events, one that I went to, and where I really found this incredible sense of a community and really saw what the possibilities of patients' voices were in affecting change and making sure that people didn't have some of the same experiences that we did. So that's where I started. I was very much one of the themes, and has always been some of the themes that have always been through my advocacy work, were ensuring that patients' voices, and you started out with patient voices, but I think it's really important to understand they are patients' voices. We're not monolithic. We're not a one kind of patient. We're always centered in this discussion, and that we always thought about everything that we did, and whether it was biomedical research advocacy, or now I do a lot more health services, health delivery system advocacy, that we really thought about what patients needed, wanted, what their values were, and that was really centered in everything we do. And then the other fundamental and core value is equitable access to quality and affordable healthcare for everyone. So that's sort of the origins of where I started, and here 27 years later, I certainly haven't finished.
And I know you've done so many things for patient advocates and for, helping yourself, but you help many, many others. So that's what I'm always impressed whenever I see you and hear what you've done. So as a longtime patient advocate, why did you stay when so many others burn out or decide this isn't what I want to do?
Well, I think there are a couple of things. First of all, as I mentioned, our work is not finished. And if we think about, I remember just very recently, and Sandi, you'll relate to this. One of the early things that we tried to do in terms of changing language, because we're always trying to change language so that it really accurately reflects language matters, words matter. And not so long ago, I heard somebody say that when patients fail chemotherapy. Now, this was one of our original, I remember this was the conversation that was going on long before I was working in patient advocacy, and people are still using that word. They're still thinking about patients as objects, and they're still thinking about patients as patients failing rather than the treatment failing to work. It's not. And so I think about things like that, or I think about our health inequities, which are the inequities persist. They're long lasting. They are seemingly intractable, but I know there are things that we can do. So I continue to work on ensuring that we have that health equity and eliminating health inequities is front and center. I also think that there's been a great evolution, and so I continue to stay from really I think of what I do as a kind of circle, and a virtuous circle, wherein we can't change the system unless we understand what individuals experience, and we can't impact individuals and make outcomes better for individuals, families, and communities unless we understand and can change the system. So what I continue to do and what I try to do is to really work in this virtuous circle of a continuous learning environment and continuous sort of learning advocacy. And I think the other thing that's allowed me to stay in advocacy, or made me, kept me in advocacy for so long, is this ability to continue to develop new programs, to develop new relationships, to evolve what we are doing as we look at the health needs, both the health needs of cancer survivors, as well as our socio-political context. And so right now I'm really fortunate. I've been at the National Patient Advocate Foundation and the Patient Advocate Foundation for 7 years now, which is fantastic. But our organization is devoted to helping everyone access equitable, affordable, and quality healthcare. And so the team that I lead is patient advocacy, engagement, and education. So we are able to develop initiatives that we co-create with others, and that we learn from patients. And I'm in an organization where learning from patients and is one of the highest values. We learn from patients, we learn from families, we learn from communities, and that's how we develop what we do. We also and we work internally and externally, and also work with patients who have serious chronic life-threatening illnesses, and most of them are under-resourced and having a lot of trouble accessing healthcare. The other thing that I just wanted to mention that has evolved with our work, I think, with advocates, and I see it all the time with advocates, is that we have evolved to thinking beyond just clinical care, but thinking about health and care, not just healthcare or clinical care. So a lot of what I do and a lot of what I've done in the last 10 years has been really working on what is the ecosystem in which we achieve health. So what are the social determinants of health? What is structural racism that we have to dismantle, or sexism or ageism, all of the different things that have to be dismantled in order to assure that everybody has equitable access to care. And the other thing I just wanted to, as I look back, as I was thinking back after we saw each other at ASCO, because we hadn't seen each other in a couple of years, about some of the origins of what we did and what was done at Alamo, and also what was done with the National Breast Cancer Coalition. And of course, my first thought goes to Dr. Susan Love, who just died last week of a recurrence of her cancer, and how one of the things I remember about Susan so well is how she was always able to take in new evidence and change her mind and change the way that she worked and change the way that she interacted and with patients. And I remember being incredibly struck by that at a San Antonio breast cancer symposium meeting, where she got up in front of this room of physicians and a lot of advocates physicians are not always the most forgiving people when you stand up and say, I was wrong. It's very hard for most people to say they're wrong. And Susan said, I was wrong about this. And I have to say, my jaw just dropped. She said, this is what I believe. And this is what I now know because of the evidence that's presented itself to us. So I think of her in both the continual learning environment that we have to be in as advocates, and we should be in as a community, and also in terms of the joy that we all brought to each other in community. And of course, I remember, and Sandi, you were there, Susan Love on the dance floor at the end of the National Breast Cancer Coalition meetings, where she was there longer than anybody else. And so
we did the conga line.
we did. And then the jumping up and down. And the first time I heard the song Who Lets the Dogs Out was at the National Breast Cancer Coalition meeting. I thought it was a joke. I had never heard the song before, but I remember her so well. And so I remember one of the things I think about when I think about advocacy is this, I think those of us who stayed in a long time, or those of us who are continual learners, who are willing to say, I was wrong about this, to reassess. To be an advocate is to always question received wisdom, and then the joy of the community. And I think Dr. Love really exemplified both of those. And it is sort of both with sadness and with joy that we remember her and all of her contributions. And I think what she did really modeled what it meant to be an advocate who made an impact.
And she was one powerful voice.
She was
yes, we were all devastated to learn of her passing, and so. But her foundation is still there. So the Susan Love Breast Cancer Foundation. So
yes, it is still there.
Look it up and see what she's done in her life.
Yeah.
So as what I'd also like you to talk about is you began Man Magazine a few years ago. And have been involved in numerous organizations over the years. Will you elaborate on your work?
Of course. So the first thing, so when I was trying to figure out what I was going to do in terms of advocacy, because I knew I wanted to do something, but really it was I want to do something. It was in the nascent days of advocacy, and it was also a time where breast cancer advocacy was really coming into its own. And there was, if you were working in advocacy, that's where you were working, as breast cancer advocacy, and then also increasingly ovarian cancer advocacy. If you were a woman, if you were a man, there was the nascent prostate cancer movement. And so I was given this incredible opportunity to become editor-in-chief and then of a magazine called Man Magazine, which was the first consumer magazine for women with breast and reproductive cancer. And we launched in October 1997, which is just crazy. And
Years ago.
a few years ago, just a few, and that's what I always say, everything's a few years ago. Oh, we did that a few years ago. Wait a minute. No, that was that was a long time. That was a few decades ago. But what we really tried to do there, I think, is these are still themes that run through everything that I do. But what we tried to do there was that we tried to communicate about what people were experiencing, combine that with sort of rigorous health reporting and medical reporting, and highlight and feature the stories of individuals. And what I always said, so at MAM, we always had people on the cover. We always, except for two concept covers, which I was on, and I insisted they cut off my head. But they, and there was, we wanted to create a sense of community for women who, and it was primarily women, there were some men, but primarily women who saw that they could see themselves in each other, so that we could both celebrate the universal experience and acknowledge the universal experience of being diagnosed with cancer, but then also honor the individual experiences. And so I think we really focused on that continuum. We actually had a humor page on the back. We had an advice column. We did one of the very early articles on sexuality after cancer, which people were, we were very direct about everything that we did, and it was really important. And then I think it had to be more than 20 years ago, we organized the first conference on African American women and breast cancer with Sisters Network, with Breast Cancer Resource Committee, with Sisters. Oh my God, I can't believe National Black Women's Health Imperative. So 20 plus years ago, when the data came out that showed that Black women were still dying at a much higher rate than white women, we were able to bring together a lot of people and report on this, and talk about how we were going to affect change. So the magazine went off kind of the pages of the magazine, but we also made sure that when we reflected all of the experiences of everyone who is diagnosed with cancer. And I think that was, at that point, that was really that was a pretty progressive thing to do, and that's something that I've continued to do throughout this time period. And frankly, the disparities and the inequities have not changed. I just co-chaired a workshop for the National Academies of Medicine, the National Cancer Policy Forum, on eliminating disparities in cancer care, because the disparities are still so great, and they continue to be great. And I'm worried that with where we are currently in our sociopolitical climate, that they will get even worse. And that's a very long tangent we could go on, but 20 some years ago, we were doing this reporting, these stories, and 25 years later, I was co-chairing a conference on eliminating cancer health disparities. So that keeps us there. And then I went to the American, that keeps us moving, that keeps me passionate, that keeps me engaged with all of this work. And the other thing that keeps me really engaged, because I know you asked me this question before, is the community of people and friends that I've built up through all of this work. And I like to say that the motto for our team is that we never lose a phone number. So, it can be years that I haven't seen you, but we can pick up right where we left off. And this group of extraordinary women and men who have been working together for decades, to ensure better outcomes for patients, and outcomes that are important to them and meaningful to them, is really is still so relevant and still so energizing. I continue to do this job, not simply because I think I do a good job at it, but also because it's so energizing, and I can see where I, along with everybody else, is making an impact. So I also did a second magazine at the American Association for Cancer Research called CR Magazine, which was for all cancers. Because at that point, I hadn't been diagnosed with breast cancer or endometrial cancer. And then I moved to the cancer support community, and then I've been at PAF and NPAF for 7 years, and then I do a lot of external work. So I have a problem with saying no. I say yes to absolutely everything because it seems to me that everything that we can do is important, but there is a theme. The theme is health equity. The theme is centering patients' voices, which also means families and communities, and really trying to make a change in how we deliver healthcare so that it meets the needs of people, not that it is not about an enterprise, that it is about people's and community needs.
Right, because financial toxicity hits so many of the patients, and whether they're Black, Latino, white, Asian, it doesn't really matter. I mean, everybody across the board who gets cancer, unless you have really, really good insurance, you're going to suffer some kind of financial toxicity.
And even if you have really, really good insurance, I think what a lot of people forgot, I mean, there's been some wins legislatively in medical debt. But when I think of medical debt as a patient, I think of it as healthcare debt. So I've told this story before, but when I was first in treatment, I was a young adult. I had very good insurance, not a very high salary because I was working in the nonprofit world, but I paid all my medical bills on time, my healthcare provider bills on time. But what I did was, in order to be able to do that, I charged some costs of daily living. So it took me a few years to pay off my credit card debt. That was about the cost of daily living. So if you only think about the financial impact in terms of what the financial impact is on clinical care, you're missing a huge portion of what the financial impact is on people. And so that's primarily what the patients who come to PAF, Patient Advocate Foundation, come about, because we help people with most of their social and financial needs. Navigation is very much what we do. So people make trade-offs all the time. They still make trade-offs between paying for medicine and paying for food. The lost cost of the opportunity costs, the caregiver costs, many people, particularly if they're working age, get their insurance through their health insurance through their jobs. If they lose their jobs because they can't work anymore, fill the job, then they lose their health insurance. So it's a whole constellation of costs, not just medical debt or what is considered medical debt, because I think of it as really healthcare debt.
It is, because when you get in that predicament, then you become depressed because you can't pay your bills. And your spouse may leave you, who knows? And you may have small children to take care of. So it's very, very difficult for especially a younger patient in all cancers to find the funds in order and organizations to help them to so they don't become so far in debt that they have to declare bankruptcy.
Right. And the medical debt is the highest cause of bankruptcy in this country. And that is just medical debt. That is not care debt. Yeah. And I think about as I mentioned, I'm a 3-time cancer survivor. I had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma when I was a young adult. And then 25 years later, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. It is almost certain that was because of radiation to my chest, which is where my lymphoma was. And then a couple of years after that, I was diagnosed with endometrial cancer, which might have been, which one of the accelerators of that was tamoxifen I took for breast cancer. But I'm okay with my choices, and I'm okay with the treatment choices I made. And, I survived non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and I got breast cancer, but it was early, and I got endometrial cancer, and it was also early stage. But I also think about the different phases of my life. So when I was first diagnosed with cancer, I was newly divorced after a short marriage. I didn't have any kids. I was director of a contemporary art center. It was a very different time in my life. When I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I was remarried, and I had two incredible children, stepchildren, and they were then in high school, and my daughter was, I mean, it's choking me up, but my daughter, I didn't realize what an impact it would have on her. She was 16 or 17. And I didn't realize how devastating it was to her that I would have this diagnosis. I also didn't realize how difficult it would be for me to accept help from her, because I was supposed to be the one who is helping her, not the other way around. And she was just extraordinary. I mean, when I was recovering from the mastectomy, because I needed a mastectomy because I had radiation, couldn't have a lumpectomy, she would come home from school every day and come and climb into bed with me, hold my hand, and we'd watch TV. And then when I was in the hospital getting mastectomy, she knew that I was going to have to work from home, and my office had been on the 3rd floor. And so she painted and redecorated the entire that bedroom that was going to become my office, which was just amazing. But when I was finished with treatment, she went back to her life. But we forget there are different phases and different impacts. And then when I had endometrial cancer, we were empty nesters. So it is very difficult as a young adult, but it's also very difficult as a middle-aged woman and a parent and everything else. So I think that there's a significant impact along every different phase of our life. And I think that there's a significant financial impact as well as a significant psychosocial impact. And we can't forget that these life phases were affected in different ways in different parts of our life.
Exactly. So I know you attend many conferences.
Yes.
Tell us why you attend these conferences, and why do you think patient advocates should attend?
So I think the only way to make change in the system is to ensure that there are constantly patients' voices in every conversation, in every place where decisions are being made, and every place where people are meeting, so that we can help drive that change, whether it's through biomedical research or through health services research. And one of the most powerful ways to do that is to be present at these conferences and to ensure that to talk. And to participate, and whether we're comfortable participating by going to a mic during a presentation, or whether we're more comfortable just talking to people and meeting people in smaller groups, the voices that are there and hearing the voices, seeing the patients, seeing the faces, and really experiencing what it is, what lived experience is, as embodied by patients and many of us are patients and patient advocates, is really critical to affecting that change. And I think that, when I think of the Alamo program at San Antonio, that was one of the first programs that really brought patients to scientific meetings. It was an extraordinary program. And I went many, many years, and then I sort of crashed it many, many years as a non-participant. And it was incredibly meaningful, I think, to both the patients who were there, the survivors who were there, and also the healthcare providers who worked within that program and provided guidance and mentorship. And then when I went to the American Association for Cancer Research, one of my major roles, so I started the patient and survivor advocacy program there, was to take on and expand the scientist survivor program, which brought patients and scientists together at AACR meetings. It was first the annual meeting, and then we moved into the science of health disparities meeting, the prevention meeting. And these were also really formative, and they were formative and transformative. And so I think that's really, they're formative for advocates because we learn a lot about what is happening on the scientific side and the delivery side. And they're really transformative because they are ways that we can affect change. And I think it's the same for the scientists and the healthcare providers who participate.
Yeah, I think you're right. And the program here in San Antonio will still be going on this year. And so we have ours. I know ASCO has a patient survivor program also. I've been to the AACR ones, both annual and disparities. And I think also, and I think you alluded to this earlier, meeting other patients and getting to know them and networking is so interesting and important for all of us.
Yes.
To learn and to continue what we're doing.
Yes. And, one of the things that I think about is that, while I will never, ever say that cancer is a gift, I mean, this is another language problem, words matter problem. I also, how my life has been enriched through cancer advocacy is really kind of beyond words. I mean, the people that I've met, the experiences that I've had, and it's been the people I've met that I would have never met before. It's really, that has been incredibly transformative as well, in this sense of community and the way that you can, advocacy really taught me, it's taught me a tremendous amount. It taught me to be much more open to other points of view, to be less judgmental of people, and to be very open to other experiences and other people's, really think about other people's, where they come from, where they live, what their experiences are, what their belief systems are. And advocacy taught me so much of how to do that in a really, in a very open way. It also taught me how to say I was wrong. I mean, something that as I said earlier, people don't like to say they were wrong, but it's taught me how to learn and change and grow. And I hope that that's what it's done for many other advocates, because when I think of my job, and you asked me earlier why I stay in advocacy, it's because I learned something. I learn at least one new thing every single day. And if you're not learning every day, then why, then to me, the job isn't worth doing. But advocacy, I continue to learn. And after 27 years, I think it's been about 27 years, I still learn so much, and I learn every day. I learn from other people, and that is also the one of the kind of consistent themes and frameworks and values of the advocacy that we do, which is that we learn from others. We do.
So where do you think patient advocacy is going in the future? I don't know. I think that there are a few areas where I would like to see it go in the future. So I think that, as we know, there's been a very large focus on eliminating health inequities and disparities. I hope that is not just a, trend that peters out, because these things like this tend to happen. I hope we continue that focus, and not just some of us, but all of us, including funders' focus, because that's critical to the work we do. I hope that we continue to learn from people, patients, and communities about what matters to them, and that we're open to understanding that things change, that it's not always the same as it was before. I think about the early days of patient advocacy, and I think about how at that point, what we really were fighting for was a seat at the table. And now
we've gotten to the point where we want to build that table and invite others to join us. So I hope that we continue to build that table, that we continue to build those chairs, and that we invite, that things are really continue to go in the direction of being very patient-driven, family-driven, caregiver-driven. So when I mean patients, I mean the whole system of patients. And that we've gone long past thinking about simply a seat at the table. So that's what I think about when I think about the future of advocacy. That's still what drives me. It's still what drives me as I learn more and more every day. We're in the middle of doing a series of workshops, and we did one in the Mississippi Delta. We did one in Richmond. We're doing one in Los Angeles. About this, we do a series of workshops everywhere about active listening and skilled communications, but not just teaching, but also teaching healthcare providers and patients, and having them come together to talk about these issues. So I think the future is continuing to ensure that the foundation is strong for patient-driven research, patient-driven healthcare system delivery, patient-driven environmental justice and social change.
I think you're exactly on point. So thank you so much, Gwen Darien. It has been a pleasure speaking with you today, and I hope that our talk will encourage those who aren't patient advocates yet to become patient advocates, and those who are patient advocates will give them the power to do more and to want more, like build the table. So I thank you so much for your discussion and for you. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Sandy. It is such a pleasure to talk to you, and it's such a pleasure. I'm so grateful for our friendship over these 25 years.
Long time.
Thank
and
you.
we're still here kicking. So.
Yes, we are.
Okay. So thank you so much again. And I hope that your future is as bright as you are.
Thank you.